Hey everyone, thank you for turning on another episode of Scent. And today is the second part of our autism series. And I have a dear friend of mine, Rich Seiber, who is one of the guys I would when I was at college, was one of my close friends who worked at the school. He was a chapel speaker, and he just had a heart of compassion for students and a compassion for good Christian media. So he was a good influence on me and many of the other students at Western Baptist, now known as Corbin University. And today we're going to talk about his son, who is autistic, and the journey they've had at home, but more importantly, at church. So, Rich, could you tell us a little bit of your testimony and about the situations uh, of autism, both at home, school, and church?
Sure. Christian, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And we really have a miraculous story to tell. We found out about our son's disabilities even before he was born. My wife had uh, a ultrasound at 20 weeks, and they discovered that there were some brain abnormalities. And you would think that that would be horrific and scary, and it was, but it was also a blessing in that it gave us time to prepare.
Mm.
And we knew that this was the child that God gave us, and we definitely wanted the child to survive and to hope for the best. And we trusted in God, and He has been faithful. And Parker is amazing, but we didn't find out after the fact. We really knew from very early on that there would be challenges, and I actually see that as an answer to prayer and as an important part of my testimony and an important part of Parker's life. So we had some inclination very early on that there would be issues, and then around 3 months after birth, we found out that those issues included cerebral palsy. And then at the age of 3, we got the official diagnosis of autism. And so Parker's been raised in the church with his disabilities from birth. And some of those experiences have been positive. Some of them have not and still are not positive. And so it's been a learning curve, and there's a lot more for all of us to learn, including me. Um, but I want Parker to know the church, and I want him to be a part of the church. And as his dad, I have to stand up and fight for him and figure out how to make that happen. And so that's part of what I want to share with you today.
Yeah. So Parker is how old now?
He's 20 years old. And in our town, you can go to school until you're 22. So he has 2 more years of school. And then his life will change pretty drastically when that phenomenon of school stops. Because I don't really know if he's going to be able to hold down a job. I don't really know what the future holds for him. But right now, he is still a part of school and he likes that structure, and that's a part of his daily life. And then church is a part of his weekly life, and we're still trying to figure all that out.
All right. Uh, what has been the biggest joy of having a son with autism?
Autistic children, in many ways, express joy more prominently, more passionately than you or I do. When my son is safe and he's having fun, he will jump up and down and flap with his hands. And so when he is jumping up and down and flapping, whether it's privately in our home or publicly in a store or at school or at church, I know that he's feeling safe and that he's feeling happy and he's excited about something. And so lots of people see that, Christian, and they think, oh, that looks odd. That looks weird. I wish that person would stop doing that. I see that and I rejoice because I know my son is happy.
Oh, wow. So that's probably one of the tough things is that people are not knowing what's going on, and instead of asking questions, they make
Sure.
judgments. Um,
Yes. And as a parent of a disabled child, you get a lot of odd stares. You sometimes get people who make comments like, I wish your child would behave better, or why can't you control your son? Things like that. People say things like that because I think they're ignorant in the moment. They're ignorant of his diagnosis, and so it can be hurtful, but it's also an opportunity to educate. It's also an opportunity to be patient and provide them with more information.
And that's one thing that we hopefully get across. It's okay to ask questions. And you probably prefer it when people ask questions instead of,
Absolutely. I would absolutely prefer, Christian, that they ask me rather than they pass judgment or they roll their eyes and walk away. I would much rather have a conversation with them about how fantastic my son is than to have them think less of him.
what's been your experience at church? What's been the good, the bad, maybe even the ugly?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. We used to live in Sacramento County, which is a large county, lots of population. And as a result, we went to a very large church. And in that church, they had a special needs ministry. And so Parker was taken care of on a weekly basis. He had a buddy assigned to him who would stay with him while I was at church. I was able to go to worship, and I knew that Parker was safe and someone was dedicated to him one on one during the entire time. But then we moved to a smaller rural community in a new county. And so we attend a much smaller church, and they don't have a special needs ministry. And so as a result, I can't bring Parker to church every week because there isn't always someone to care for him. There isn't always someone to stay with him and make sure that he's safe and to make sure that he's engaged. And so that's been a frustrating experience in that, we're called to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. And yet my son can't do that every week. And I don't exactly have answers for how to navigate that.
Mm. And I think that's one of the reasons I want to focus on this issue because I think sometimes people think, well, we're too small. And honestly, it comes not down to the size of the church, it comes down to the preparation. From your perspective, what's the best preparation you've seen, maybe from that larger church, that a smaller church could implement?
Hmm. Well, I mean, it is fair to say that the larger church has a larger pool of volunteers. And so
True.
it may be easier for them, it would seem, to meet the need. I would think for a smaller church that's not meeting the need, the problem becomes, are they even asking the question? And so I think what the larger church did well is that they saw a need and they started asking questions like, how can we serve this community? And what they found was, when they served this community, more people will come to them. And so what I wish smaller churches would do, and our church, has probably somewhere between 300 and 400 people, so it's not tiny, tiny. It
No,
just needs to start asking questions like, how can we serve this community? How do we serve these parents? How do we stand up for Parker? And I think if they were to ask those questions, that's a good place to start.
it's an excellent place to start because the community of those with autism is growing.
Yes.
And not only is it the ministry to those kids, but it's also to the parents, grandparents, guardians that do need that rest with the Lord. And these kids are capable of hearing the gospel and respond to the gospel. So that's a very important thing that we need to get across and train our Sunday school teachers, children church, but also our adult ministries. Um, when Parker attends church, how are the people react around him? Are they compassionate, or is it a lot of trying to answer a lot of questions?
No, I would say that our home church is very compassionate. They love Parker as best they can. And Parker is blessed. A lot of children with autism have difficulty making eye contact. They're often not as verbal as their contemporaries. And so it's hard for them to be social. Parker is probably on the more social end of the spectrum. And so he's able to make eye contact. He's able to have conversations, although it's difficult. You generally have to talk about a preferred item in order to get Parker to engage. So if you want to have a conversation with Parker, you can't really talk about school or the weather. You have to talk about forklifts or NASCAR or things that he's interested in. And that will encourage him to engage. But he is willing to engage. And so I think the church has a desire to love him and to communicate with him. They don't necessarily know how to do that. And there isn't necessarily a person who's willing or provided to do that on a regular basis. But I think their heart is in the right place.
Good. Um, what's one thing that you do at home that in adjusting when there is some difficulty that you could pass on to other parents?
Sure, I think, and I'm not always good at this, Christian. I will be honest. Sometimes life gets busy and you forget, or whatever interferes. But he obviously likes structure and routine, and he responds well when you prepare him in advance. So one example I'll give you is he's 20 years old and he's a boy. So what are 20-year-old boys interested in? They're interested in 20-year-old girls. So he loves to go to church and interact with the other young females at church. But he doesn't always know how to do that appropriately. And he doesn't always know how to do that and keep his behavior in check. And so preparing him in advance. Okay, Parker, we're about to go to church. That means you're going to see Joanna today, and you're going to see Miriam today, and you're going to see Riley today, and preparing him in advance. What kinds of conversations could you have with them? How can you be friendly to them? If they're busy, how can you respond politely and not get upset? If they don't have time to talk, how can you still be a good friend? So I think preparing him for scenarios in advance is one thing that works well.
That's good. That's good. Um, for yourself, when you can't go to church, how do you find rest?
Well, I'm still able to go to church every Sunday, Christian. I don't want to mislead people. It's Parker who isn't able to come every week. So
Okay.
if there's no one that's able to stay with Parker, he just has to stay home and I'm still able to go to church. But I feel bad about that because I really do think he has a desire to go every week and I really have a desire to bring him every week. But I'll be honest with you, because of his autism and his behavioral issues, he's not really able to sit through a 90-minute worship service. He's not able to go to church in the same way that you and I do. And so church has to meet him and engage with him in a different way. And we haven't always figured out how to do that. 2 times a month, the high school ministry, they provide volunteers to sit with Parker while I'm at church. The
Okay.
other 2 weeks of the month, there isn't a volunteer who stepped up, and so he's just not able to come.
Well, I'm thankful that they're able to at least do
Yeah,
something so he gets
yeah,
to be in church and hear the gospel and be ministered to. Because that's the thing, we can't lose sight on people. And no
right.
matter what's going on in their life, God loves people and loves their
Mhm.
souls. And
Yeah,
so I really want to encourage people that may not know much about autism, get to know. Uh, get to know the facts, get to know people, ask questions. I think that's
sure.
one of the things that we want to get across is it's okay to ask questions.
Absolutely. Ask questions, interact with them as best you can. Talk to Parker, talk to people you see. out in public and they're different than you. Ask them questions, ask the people around them questions. I think that's a great way to get started. Parker and I had an experience once at a Home Depot store where he was excited because he likes forklifts and he likes machinery and tools. And so he was jumping up and down and flapping. And there was an older gentleman at the store who was very uncomfortable with that. And I think I wish I had approached that man and said, "Hey, are you uncomfortable with this? Can we talk about it? Can I tell you about my son?" But this was very early in my experience with Parker's autism. And instead, I just kind of thought, well, that man is really missing out. And I missed out on an opportunity to maybe educate him and strike up a conversation with him. So be willing to do that.
I love that. Well, Rich, uh, I'll be praying for Parker and you and your wife. I appreciate you coming on. I will have you back. We could talk about media, as
Sure.
you have a great heart for Christian media, and I look forward to that conversation. But thank you for coming on on this channel and discussing this. And thank you so much. God bless.